Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Kaplan, Executive Editor of SC Magazine, and I am pleased to welcome you to today's webcast, Detecting Advanced Threats and Malware with Content-Aware SIEM, and this is presented by NitroSecurity. Now, as you probably know, SIEM, or Security Information and Event Management, is considered an essential component to the compliance strategy, but what you may not be as aware of is that the technology has matured now to the point where it really can be quite helpful in the detection and response of advanced attacks, which are being perpetrated by malicious insiders or stealthy adversaries who have been able to infiltrate the network. To talk about this today, I am pleased to welcome Jeremy Conway, who is the Senior Security Analyst at NitroSecurity, and he's going to explain how this technology can integrate database session and application layer data to detect dangerous botnets, hidden payloads, and covert communication channels. After Jeremy speaks, we'll leave aside about 10 minutes or so for some Q&A, so please get those questions in as they come to your head. And without further ado, I will pass the baton over to Jeremy. Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody else for joining. Like Dan said, my name is Jeremy Conway. I'm a Senior Security Researcher for NitroSecurity. Today's agenda, it's going to be really straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about SIEM, or SIEM, capabilities, and how it can help with these advanced threats, such as data leakage, stuff like that. So talk about how it can help with malware and some additional things that it can do with correlation and content awareness. With that, let's move on here. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about NitroSecurity, just to give you a little background about why it was important to us and why we like to talk about this. NitroSecurity, we're a real-time security and compliance company. We've integrated SIEM and log management into a single pane of glass. Our claim to fame originated with our unmatched speed and scale. We love the challenge of processing lots and lots of data, and we love the proof of concepts that we can get to do those types of things for people. We never back down from any amounts of data. We also have some unique database and application monitoring capabilities, which is what I'm going to stress today, is showing how some of this content awareness and not just content identification can aid in detecting data loss, data leaks, malware, advanced threats, covert channels, those types of things. We also have an integrated IPS-IDS family, and we're certified in the defense realm and also in the critical infrastructure. We've seen tremendous growth in 2010. We have 500 enterprise-plus customers in both government and enterprise-wide, and our headquarters is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. All right, so enough. We also are well-known with SC Magazine in this webcast. Over the past couple of years, they've recognized us as a top product. They've also given us the staple or stamp of lab approved, and also called us one of the innovators for the Hall of Fame in 2010. All right, well, let's get to the meat of it. All right, so lots and lots of data. We have all these different devices sitting out on our networks and our infrastructures, such as firewalls, IDSs, IPSs. We have a bunch of traditional network monitoring tools and stuff in place that can do real nice graphs and give us the behavior and performance of these different routers and firewalls and what's going on. Performance network monitoring type solutions. We also have tons of host-based controls, such as local firewalls, local HIDs, access control lists, those types of things. And then all these different servers and applications that we have out there, they produce these logs for email monitoring, for database monitoring, for network device monitoring, web filter monitoring, URL filtering. Basically, the point here is we've got lots and lots of data from all different types of things, even vulnerability assessment results, configuration specs, asset inventories, all these things. And they're all in play on most of our enterprise networks and the networks that we monitor, but we're still seeing more security incidents than ever. And, why is that? So let me introduce you to SIEM. We from NitroSecurity believe that, SIEM plays a key part into trying to combat the rise of security incidents. So security information and event management is sometimes defined as a set of technologies that encompasses log, data collection, aggregation, normalization, retention, analysis, and workflow. Log data collection is probably not unfamiliar to many of the folks on this webcast. It's basically just consuming the logs. Aggregation is when you take multiple events and aggregate them together to a single event to show a number of times that this occurred in an infrastructure, but reducing the amount or volume of logs. Normalization is basically the categorization of events, such as if you had an event on a IDS and it was an exploit-like, they would categorize it exploit for mail server or something like that. Retention and analysis and workflow, two major factors of SIEM. Two driving factors for somebody looking to get into SIEM. The major one is compliance and log management, but we also like to push the issue of security operational efficiency, gaining more operational efficiency in your security infrastructures. SIEM is the evolution of two distinct technologies. It's really good to know where it came from. Basically, it came from security event management, where you're aggregating and collecting a bunch of security events, and also the security information management, where you're enriching, normalizing, correlating events. SIEM is still evolving, though. Right now, SIEM is very much context aware. And what is context awareness? Context awareness is basically adding on to the common static logs that you see in a log file. So take, for example, at the bottom of this slide here, we have a simple SSH login. If you're looking at hundreds of thousands of these, or even just this one, it can be a little bit confusing, or from an analyst standpoint, it takes a lot for the analyst to understand what all these different numbers are, or what all these different letters are, those types of things in a log. And when you're looking at across an enterprise environment where you have, thousands and thousands of logs with all these different types of formats and stuff, what SIEM will do is it'll break that apart and tell you and provide additional context around each one of those individual segments of that log file. So take, for example, a port number. It'll tell you what services or something are running on it. Or take, for example, an IP address. It can do stuff like, geolocation of where that IP is located in the real. Or maybe a username that gets mapped back to an LDAP server or an Active Directory server. Or, going back to the IP address, maybe just mapping it to a WINS or a DNS server for reverse lookup to know what that host is. So that's providing additional context to this static raw log file or log line. That's where it was. Now, SIEM is evolving even further, right, into content awareness, not just content identification. Content identification is the ability to identify things such as HTTP or SSL or SMTP type traffic on a network. Where content awareness differs from content identification is content awareness can look inside the payload of that application and pull out metrics from it, such as the email's contents, such as the username on a social network or an IM or a P2P communication-like kind of thing. It can look for anomalies not only in network behavior analysis, but it can look for anomalies in application behavior analysis. Like right now there's a 0-day for Adobe, where a Flash document is being embedded inside of a Word document and sent out, and an application aware or content awareness can identify this embedded object inside there and tell you that it's malicious. Where application awareness would just say, hey, there was a Word document on an HTTP transfer, or it may just say there's an HTTP transfer. So it's really important to know the difference between content awareness and just application identification. Also database monitoring, and it's really important, especially when it comes to data leakage monitoring. And in a lot of malware and advanced threats, data leakage is where you can catch a lot of this stuff in a commonality because of stuff leaving, or important data leaving your infrastructure. All right, so let's talk about detecting advanced attacks and data leakage. Both insiders and threats and outsider threats, attacks have become very, very much more advanced and have grown very sophisticated. And a lot of that has to do with how complex our environments have gotten. Technology is growing super, super fast. I mean, we're adding mobile devices to our internal networks. I mean, this expansion of applications and the latitude that we give each individual employee on what can be hooked up to the network, what can't be hooked up, and how it's filtered and what they're running, those types of things. It's just expanding just increasingly fast. With that, it's also pushing our networks to be bigger and faster. It's not uncommon for most enterprise companies to have at least 1 gig backbones, if not full 10 gig backbones now. And new applications are spawning up every single second of the day. Not just the applications you can go and purchase and run on like a mail server or a web server or something like that, but just custom applications with their own logging format and their own issues and circumstances around that for individual specific goals for an enterprise. application-aware technology is key to truly detecting and preventing modern malware and these sophisticated attacks. With all these more complexities in monitoring a network, you have to become application-aware. You can no longer just look at packets on a wire and determine on a packet-by-packet basis that something is good or bad. The technology is not completely outdated, and it's useful, especially in incident response where you know the characteristics of a certain packet or something that you could then investigate further. But to identify additional context to an attack or what's actually happening, the monitoring application has to become application-aware. So with that, SIEM can bring in both that content awareness, that original stuff that we were talking about where you enrich the log by adding DNS lookup or global, and context awareness all into this giant correlation engine. And the correlation engine can take both of these things, such as the content and context, combine them together and create correlations so that you can find malware and viruses and advanced threats, where you would see something like, be able to correlate something in log lines such as multiple SSH logins, and then one succeeded, and then you see the privilege escalation, and then all of a sudden you see a bin being TFTP'd from some remote IP address in another country that you don't normally do business for, and then from there you see SMTP traffic leaving base to multiple domains throughout the world, and those types of things a SIEM can provide. A single analyst looking over all those different devices, or even a log management solution where you have to know what you're searching for to correlate those things, can be easily overlooked. Where SIEM can be kind of automated and give you some guidance and do some of this correlation automatically for you. All right, so let's go through some use cases, some scenarios. This basic scenario here is an internal user accesses some sensitive database records. User also emails sensitive data outside the organization to a personal email address of his own. So just to tell you how traditional context-aware solutions would look at this, we would look at monitoring logs for email servers. We'd access logs for email fields, info, such as attachment types and possibly names. We would look at possibly monitoring on the database itself, logs there, such as access logs, look for anomalies in frequency. And that's not really a bad solution, but it's also not really easy to identify what has actually occurred or what is occurring through that. When you have to weed through those type of context, raw logs or events, it becomes a kind of difficulty. So the content-aware additions, or what content awareness can bring to that, it can give you the database activity trending. It can detect the sensitive data not by the access logs, but actually looking at the data traversing to see that sensitive data return from the query. And it gives you the full transition history to include content and payload. So with a content-aware monitoring solution, what you can see is that user logging in, and then every single query and response that occurred during that in its session until he is logged off. Inline application data monitoring, we can do the full decode, or looking at in the SMTP MIME email, breaking it down and actually seeing the sensitive data inside there. Full decode of attachments to include unzipping common zip file forms. So if that file that was retrieved from the database server, such as the sensitive information, if he encoded it in a zip file or compressed in a zip file and then sent it off, content awareness would break that apart, right? So it would see that it was an email, it'd break that out, and then it would break out the attachment, which is a zip file, and then inside that zip file would break out the Word document, and you'd be able to look for sensitive information all the way down to that Word document, not just identifying that a zip file went from an internal user to an external user. And what would that look like? So here's a diagram of what it would kind of look like and the different fees that you would bring in and what you could correlate it with. So context, you're looking at email logs that may contain info and specific keywords, like we said earlier. And then content awareness, you're looking for like a DBM sensitive data detection methodology. And it all feeds back into this like correlation receiver technology where we can correlate with access logs, network traffic patterns, application logs, local email client logs, local file access. So correlate all that information up and provide it back to a security operator or a security analyst so that they can do this. If this was, your traditional log management, just throw it all in a pile and we'll sort through it, it would be very hard to trend or get the behavior or even detect a lot of this stuff. So let's look at another scenario. Another scenario is an internal user tries to sell proprietary data to a competitor. Internal user tries to post sensitive data to an external website via HTTP or FTP. Traditional context SIEM, how would you identify this? You would look at things such as web proxy logs, content filtering logs, basically determine where the user was going and what information is being sent, but only by the content, such as the file name or the extension on the file. Where content awareness adds to this and makes it a little easier is that the outbound data can also be looked at for sensitive information. So was this just a benign email attachment with maybe some jokes in it, or was this actual, Social Security numbers in a file? And it can be looked at, not only if it was HTTP post, but if it was FTP post, right? So the file name is parsed, the gzip is decoded, and the document is decoded to bring some additional information to the analyst. What would that look like? So in this scenario, we would see in the context, we would see the HTTP transaction such as the method equal post. We could see stuff like strange URLs, IP addresses, file names. It's really common for, especially when it's bots or some type of malware, for user agent strings to be misspelled or out of context or the wrong version number. Those types of things can be found with context. Content, so application data monitoring, what you'll be able to detect there is the actual document and session transaction, looking inside that document to see the actual sensitive information going to the remote server. And if it's like gzip encoded, like most web optimization is, it would automatically break that apart so that you can look inside of it. The content stuff is what you would see on the top and bottom of this slide, where you see, just general log files for, HTTP post, FTP gets, that's retrieving the file, and also at the very top you see some general information, our IAS Server 6.0 logs. Analyst has to deal with these multiple thousands of log lines. It becomes very, very complicated for them to pull that information out and correlate it in their head themselves. So what a SIEM can do is break those all down for you, provide the content and context around it to automatically correlate some of this stuff and bring stuff to your awareness. Is there false positives in this? Of course. Is there things that are missed? Of course. It's a learning system, not only with the end user but with the application itself, and determining what's normal, what's not normal, those types of things. It's an ongoing process. All right, let's look at possibly network printers, right? This is another common way that data can get up and walk out of your environment that a lot of places don't even monitor. Do we know what is actually going to our network printers? Is somebody printing sensitive data? Traditional way of monitoring this, you've basically got to look at the printer logs. It's very difficult and detect, and it's very hard to prevent it. So, but it shouldn't stop you from trying to do this. Well, where can content awareness aid in this scenario? Well, basically, content awareness, they'll understand the printing protocol itself, right? So you'd be able to detect the sensitive data embedded in that document that's getting printed and monitoring, right? So you can do simple keyword regex dictionary-like files where it's made up of a bunch of keywords or a language that you've specified that detects sensitive information in your environment. Maybe it's keywords such as the combination of classified and additional things. So it would flag those additional things. It would help weed out some of the false positives, because the content awareness way is basically looking for something like a credit card file .xls spreadsheet, where the content awareness would be using regular expressions like you see on the left hand of your screen, looking for data inside that file that's being printed to let you know that there was actually a MasterCard or a Visa card being sent out. So it lowers the amount of false positives. All right, let's look at how anti-malware tools can help. So malware known to be involved in data theft and sensitive data leakage is detected on a local system, but it's not eliminated. Traditionally, what would we do? We look at local system anti-malware log tools, like a centralized antivirus server, and we can then leverage that with a normal content-aware SIEM. Logs will identify malware as not cleaned and not quarantined. So we're looking for those type of events to come back from our centralized AV server. But what can content awareness do? It can also provide the context or the scope of what's going on in supporting details. So when we find this in our AV solution, the additions that content awareness can do is it can give you, was that AV delivered via a Word document or a PDF file or some malicious JavaScript embedded in an ad server that's been poisoned when the person visited some popular website. Those are things that the content awareness, by breaking all those protocols down and giving you the session information, can speed up and aid you in. And then you can go and look and see if anyone else was hit by that. So what does that look like? It kind of looks like this on the screen here. Basically, on the left, you see the logs. You got some kind of Trojan zlob, a popular older Trojan. But what you see is your enterprise AV and your internal LAN talking, and then that data being passed back in to your log management SIEM solution with correlation and those types of things. So that's a pretty easy use case. Got some more. Let's talk about just normal traditional network monitoring. So users are losing data via P2P networks. Users are transmitting large amounts of information and files via other transfer mechanisms. Right, so the traditional solution to combat this would be monitoring to detect high bandwidth consumption with specific systems. Basically, it's things like monitoring net flow, looking for top talkers. Did your top talker change from your highly active web server to some internal guy doing P2P stuff? Those will tend to surface in your common top talker like graphs through MRTG or just general net flow monitoring kind of stuff. Identify suspicious IPs, geolocations, ASNs, and ports. So the traditional context, we can look for things like, what geolocation is now very popular to us. What ASNs, is this an ASN that is known to not go after bad things, bulletproof hosting more or less. Suspicious ports, all of a sudden did we get a port that rose to the top on our top talkers that is not normally there? Those types of things. But what can content awareness bring? Well, it can decode the actual P2P traffic itself, and it can extract the content looking for the sensitive data in that protocol. So it's not uncommon for malware and Trojans and stuff to use a P2P client-to-client communication to steal information and also pass command and controls back and forth in like a fast flux type network to avoid being shut down. So being able to decode what information is being passed back and forth in a P2P traffic is extremely key here, which couldn't be done with just looking at logs. You can utilize and track down by username, so the username that was logged into these different technologies, if it's an IM or something like that, you'd be able to correlate that information. It also helps with things like detecting protocol on unusual ports, such as ACP not on your standard 80 or 8080 port, or non-ACP traffic on port 80, or non-SSL traffic on 443, because these are all common ways that network monitoring kind of falls short if you can't do the application identification and you're not aware of the actual application being used for transferring the data back and forth. So what does this look like? So here you go at the very top, you see your normal top talker distribution chart, something that you may have seen commonly with a tool like MRTG or something. And what you're looking for is anomalies, right? Spikes or valleys that may be of interest that you would go and dive into and figure out why. This can be commonly retrieved, your normal way with SNMP, looking at interface stats, or actual net flow monitoring, where you use like version 9 and the stuff's getting reported back to you. You can correlate that in conjunction with other logs, event data, network monitor tools, early warning sign stuff, basically providing an early warning sign for data leakage. If all of a sudden your top talker is some client embedded in your LAN and he's outweighing your mail servers, your FTP servers, your ACP servers, these are clues to go and check out what's going on. But they're not definitive guides that something actually happened. It could be a misconfiguration. It could be the guy has a task where he now has to interface with somebody and he's transferring lots of data. So context will push you to it, but it's not really going to be able to tell you whether or not something is really, really bad. That's where content awareness kind of helps eliminate some of those false positives, narrows the scope, where we can look at the actual content that is being moved around to see if it actually contains sensitive data. You can start to do even further utilization tracking, right? So if we have a shared host that sits in, I don't know, the conference room, and all of a sudden that's our top talker, who was logged in when it was happening? What applications were they logged into? Your normal context will just say, hey, that IP was pushing a bunch of traffic, but who was actually logged in at that time and using what applications? And is that username different than what he authenticated as? So if he authenticates with Active Directory as his work, and then he jumps into his AIM chat client and starts pushing files out somewhere, you'd be able to correlate those things to then scope and see if those patterns exist anywhere else in your network. And we could see if it was happening on an unusual port or if he was pushing a protocol over a common port to mask himself, like 443, which is normally SSL encrypted traffic, and maybe he's just pushing regular raw socket across. We'd be able to detect those types of things with application awareness. All right, here's another scenario. P2P software, spyware is installed in an environment. Specifically named files and data are being transferred via the network. Known backdoors or covert channels are being employed to send data from the organization. Your traditional solution would be to establish network security solutions are employed, such as IDS, IPS, and firewalls. You're basically just using the standard tools to try to detect it. What content awareness can bring to you is, again, that identification of anomalies in the application layer, such as non-HTTP on port 80 and non-SSL on port 443. Those are normally like covert channels masquerading on well-known ports to get through these firewalls and IDSs and IPSs. This is what it would kind of look like. As you can see, your context awareness would be your IDS, IPS. It'd be looking for things such as malware and P2P, simple file names, covert channels, somewhat, right, for what it can detect. If you can find some kind of pattern inside of individual packets they traverse that would identify covert channel, IPS could do that. Firewalls could detect abnormal packets, such as protocol anomalies, such as seeing a SYN and a reset flag set in the exact same package. Doesn't make sense. All data can be logged, or you can log all denied connection attempts, such as if you've got a really good egress filtering, all of a sudden you see an IP hitting multiple ports on your firewall trying to get out different ways. That could be malware, or it could just be simply Skype trying to get out. That's what context will bring to you. Where the content will add to that is these different things that are communicating out. It can tell you what protocols are happening and what they're doing. So it gives you just a little more to correlate with. It gives you a little more intelligence and narrows down the space of what a security analyst has to investigate, and provides a bunch of additional information to go off of. All right, so let's talk about detecting sensitive leaks with host logs. User repeatedly tries to access files or directories that contain sensitive data without having proper credentials. How would we identify that with traditional solutions is we'd basically look at the host-based access logs, which may be the local or domain level, and it indicates stuff as failure to resources, right? So you get the object access denied on an Active Directory or on a Windows file server, right? It basically just a bunch of denies trying to open up or traverse different directories on a file server. And any other user access-related logs are applicable in this scenario. It could be FTP servers, it could be HTTP servers where they're getting 404 errors. They're trying to get the pages that aren't listed. They're just basically brute force going through there. Then content awareness, what can it do? Well, authentication protocol support for tracking things such as SMB, so we can actually look inside there. You don't have to rely on the host reporting it was bad. You can actually see the authentication failures in the SMB traffic or the sys traffic or FTP, HTTP, those types of things. Here's what it would kind of look like. Basically, you see on the left-hand side a nice little failure audit where an account tried to log in and access some data. It looks like it was Alice. You would get that kind of information back. That would be from the host being reported back to the SIEM. But your application data application data monitoring would be able to pull that back as well, because it would monitor that through the SMB traffic. And it gives you kind of an early warning sign of something's going on. All right, so those are like the general text-based walkthrough scenarios. What I want to do now is kind of take you through some additional scenarios where we actually look at how this workflow would look like in a SIEM. So basically, I came up with this Jimmy Detectall. He's a security analyst for Hangars R Us, a Fortune 5 company probably, because hangars are very popular. And he's investigating a weak password violations when he stumbles across an additional alert within his SIEM titled large file transfer. Upon further inspection in the alert and comparing the event with the flow traffic, Jimmy, because he's high speed, uncovers a slow and low data exfiltration attack. This data is exfiltrated, occurs every night at 1 a.m. and is sending encrypted data over port 80 to a Chinese IP address. I'm going to show you how this looks like, or what this would look like to Jimmy as he's doing this investigation. All right, so this little dashboard here is very common in SIEMs. It's basically called a normalization dashboard or a categorized dashboard. It shows you the events that are occurring throughout your entire enterprise environment in one single pane of glass, and it breaks them down into different categories, such as policy authentication, exploits, malware, those types of things. And each one of those major categories are then further broken down into subcategories where you have things like, take for example on this page here we have authentication, which is further broken down into login attempts, logout attempts, password associated things with authentication, user accounts, those types. For Jimmy here, we're going to investigate weak passwords. So he basically drills down into these 700,000 events here, password events, and he drills down into just the weak password kind of things, which there's about 1,000 of them. So he would probably want to look at the top talker guy or the top violator, which would be identified here on the exact same screen. He would, you could basically see that this IP address is the top offender. All right, so we want to investigate that top offender further. We basically apply a filter. Now, every SIEM is a little different. This is how you would do it in a NitroSecurity SIEM. You basically pull up the filter pane, apply it in the source IP, hit refresh, and now we can see everything that this guy did in the context of your current view, which is probably current day. So we can see this guy had authentication events, he had policy violations, those types of things. You see in there protocol anomalies like FTP. You also see HTTP protocol anomalies. These types of things. You also see this HTTP encoded Unicode violation kind of thing or anomaly going on. One that we want to key in here, though, is a large file transfer. So you have all these oddities going on, nothing that really says, hey, this guy's been hacked or this guy's got malware or any of this other stuff, but you see several little anomalies going on, and then you have large file transfer. We may want to look into what that large file transfer is. So we basically highlight it, and we can see the additional information down here at the bottom, and we start to investigate that event. Expand out these event details, and all of a sudden we can see that this large file transfer was from Beijing, China. This is that context additionality to the actual log. So obviously we had either an IDS or an application data monitoring or something that was monitoring, maybe a proxy server said, hey, there was a large file transfer. We enriched that data, that log that came back by looking up the IP address in the GeoIP database and saying, hey, that was Beijing, China that it came from. So that's of interest. We may want to look at what that large file transfer was. So with application data monitoring, you would have the ability to look at what was occurring inside of there. We would want to look at the session details for that transaction. And session details isn't a packet-by-packet view. It's the entire session of what that user did during this large file transfer. So what you see here is you can see that it was utilizing an HTTP post method, right? So that's your HTTP post. That's your application awareness. You can see how many bytes were transferred. You can see the user agent that did it. And what's kind of key here is that it's very common for them to misspell user agent stuff. You see it says Windows instead of Windows. We get the URL that it came from. We get the file name that was uploaded. And actually, the way this display looks out is it starts at layer 7 and goes all the way down, right? So you have layer 7, 6, 5, 4, all the way down to layer 2. But we now know that there's some data transfer. We know how it was transferred, what URL was transferred, how many bytes were done. But we may want to correlate that from event information to our network flow information, our network monitoring kind of things, like how many flows are going where. It's very, very simple to do. You basically leave that filter that's still applied and just select a total byte view, right? So we can see the total bytes that were transferred. And you get a display like this. And on this display we see, by that by our IP to that Chinese IP space, a nice little summary of bytes. He's definitely the top talker. And over here on the left, you see these nice little spikes occurring every night at 1 o'clock. So what do you think those spikes are if they're always happening to this Chinese IP address? It's basically a covert channel, right? So just drilling through that in a walkthrough through what a SIEM can do, here are some key takeaways, right? Remember that I think his name was Jimmy Detectall from Hangars R Us. He was initially investigating a compliance or policy violation. And in that process, he uncovered a higher severity incident, which is a covert channel happening at 1 o'clock every night where our data is getting transferred out to China. SIEM normalization, the key with that is that categorization or that normalization taxonomy speeds up how quickly an operator can get to what the overall view is for any single host or his environment, right? It breaks it out into all those different categories and gets subcategories. Content awareness positions SIEM as a pseudo-forensic tool, right? So you can actually see further into the entire session, not just the individual packet. We could have downloaded the packets and stuff from there. It wasn't in this use case, but it gives you the wider session, not just the individual packet like an IPS or an IDS would normally do. GeoIP, I hear it commonly referred to as eye candy, but in this time it provided context. Events combined with flows can tell the whole story, right? We saw large file transfer, but until we looked at the flows for that host for the overall week, we didn't know that there was a covert channel. Here's some actionable items instantly that could have been provided from a SIEM or this use case, right? We obviously know the antivirus missed the Trojan. Why? Because there was no events from there, right? So we probably ought to update or go check the virus definitions on that host. Maybe it was disabled by the Trojan, maybe it wasn't updated, maybe the user disabled it because it was getting in the way of his gaming activity, who knows. But we need to go check that out. misspelled user agent, right? So this is where we take the additional application data monitoring stuff and apply it back to our traditional context stuff. And that is, hey, we saw a misspelled user agent. We can apply that into our IPSs and now get global identification if this happens anywhere else. Password policies needed enforced. Obviously, we started with a weak password investigation. Firewall mitigation to block the China IP address. We could go ahead and put that in there and monitor any other hosts that try to connect to that on our firewall logs. So an egress filter. We instantaneously scope the entire event to include time frame and supporting events all in a single pane of glass. And that's the benefits of a SIEM. You can do this with traditional tools and on the command line using, grep, awk, those type of things. It just may take you days or weeks to come up with all this information instead of just a few seconds or minutes with using a SIEM. And the interesting thing here to note is a lot of people talk about, the need for SIEM and correlation. And in this instance, there was no fancy correlation needed. We basically went through a general workflow or normal operations to uncover what was actually going on. So there was no automated correlation by the SIEM or auto magic going on for this kind of stuff. All right, let's look at one more. This is one that we'll look at discovering HTTP command and control spam bots, and we'll actually use correlation. Some correlation logic that I investigated about a year ago doing this. But basically, it's Yo-Yo Inc. has discovered that some of its internal client computers had recently been compromised to take part of the HTTP command and control botnet that sends out spam. Very common scenario. To further discover and classify incidents such as this one, Yo-Yo security analyst Joe Demand has created a few simple correlation rules. The correlation rules correlate events, allows Yo-Yo Inc. to identify high-risk activity that may normally go undetected until an in-depth network forensic investigation can be conducted. So he takes the information he learned about this spam bot, he applies it into some correlation logic so that his younger junior analysts can respond to it very, very quickly and don't need the skill set that he has. So by combining correlated events with normalized events, Yo-Yo Inc. has reduced the amount of time it would take for an analyst to investigate the incident and classify the impact it has on the business processes with that organization. So let's look at what this would look like. So basically here's a, I don't know if everybody's familiar with logic gates, but this is kind of what the correlation looks like visually. You have a malware event from a non-HTTP server, and you also have HTTP traffic on source port 80, basically meaning that that client is acting as an HTTP server, but he's not defined as an HTTP server in our policy. All those three things occur on an internal IP within 10 minutes. We have a possible HTTP bot. So we go to the bottom side. We have, again, a malware event on a non-SMTP server, and this time we choose to use firewall monitoring, right, where we have SMTP traffic on port 25 outbound. So that client computer is trying to connect to outbound servers on port 25. So he's trying to directly send mail to something within 10 minutes. That we have a possible spam bot. But if those two things occur on the exact same internal IP all within 10 minutes, we are likely to have an HTTP command and control spam bot. And basically what that is a spam bot that receives his configurations, his email addresses, the instructions over the HTTP protocol, and then begins to spam out those types of things. It's very, very common. All right, so that's what it would look like visually. This is kind of what it would look like in a SIEM. This is basically a correlation rule. You can see the AND gate for the two correlated rules. This is the one that would be on the far right gate, right? So you have two correlated events. You have the possible HTTP bot, you have possible spam bot, and then you have some generic configuration here that says that all this occurs within 10 minutes. It could be occurred in an hour or 2 hours, whatever works for your environment. All right, so break those individual rules down, or those two related rules down into what makes up them. So this is like correlation on top of correlation. These are the first correlation rules, right? So this is what identifies something as a possible HTTP bot logic. Basically, we're looking at the categorization or normalization, and we're looking for a non-HTTP server acting as an HTTP server. So we have something where a Trojan was detected, and then we also have where the signature ID is the identifying that it's not an HTTP server, and the content awareness of non-HTTP server acting as an HTTP server. And this is kind of what it would look like inside of a correlation builder. Different SIEMs will present this data differently. This is how NitroSecurity presents it. Very visual light. Here's the spam bot correlation. Again, we're using the categorization or normalization taxonomy to say something happened, a malware event, and then it was followed by some miscellaneous authentication attempt, which is on port 25, which would be your firewall access logs, letting or denying something in and outbound on port 25 from a client. So I can update my slide. I think I went too far. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So what does this look like visually? What you see here is a general correlated dashboard or an incidents dashboard, something that gives you all your correlated events right in front of you in a nice little dashboard. Remember, we were looking for the HTTP command and control spam bot, which shows up at the top of the page, and we also remember that that is actually the correlation of two correlated events, which are the events that are highlighted in green on this screen. So we would see that if we wanted to investigate what that meant, we would simply click on a few things to bring up the event details. Inside those event details, we get all your normal details that you would associate with any log, right, such as the source IP, destination IP, the ports, those types of things. But in addition, you would want to be interested in what are the source events that made up that correlated event, right? So you have a source event tab here. These are the things that occurred in the environment that made up that. As you can see here, it looks like we have a firewall event, an IPS event, and an application data monitoring event. You may want to break those down and look inside there a little more. So we'll look at the IPS event first. And remember, geolocation automatically happens. In this case, it's kind of small on my screen, but it looks like it was Finland. So we have an IPS event that came from Finland. We may want to look at if the IPS signature is accurate. So we look at the signatures. This is all stuff that SIEM can provide you in a single pane instead of having to go and look and research the rule files or some place where you'd have to go look up this information for the messages or your configs and that type of stuff. It's all shown into a single pane of glass, speeding up your processes. All right, so we can see here that the IPS signature is actually looking for this regular expression that matches on the M equals or these multiple post things here, right, with the PCRE. All right. All right, so here is us verifying that that signature worked. Here's the actual content broken out. In most SIEMs, in our SIEM, what we do is we provide it two different ways. One is in hex, which some people are comfortable looking at, some of them aren't, and then we also decode it for you and show it to you. So you see the GET request with the PCRE, and we can verify that that actually was a positive match. Let's look at the firewall event. So what's kind of cool about this firewall event is we have an HTTP command and control spam bot. One of the things we need to worry about is our reputation of sending spam. By looking at this correlated event right here in this incident dashboard, we can see that, hey, we had rejected spam. Why? Because the firewall event, when it would try to go outbound, it rejected it, right? It stopped it from going out there. It's not saying this is not spam monitoring. This is just the port 25 based on the correlation traffic. It was blocked on its outbound egress. So we know that we don't have to go worry about our reputation, which could be a pain in the butt to fix. All right. So let's dive into some of the application data monitoring to get a better idea of what's going on here. We see it's on port 80 and it is World Wide Web, right? But we know this is a non-HTTP server, so this is a client. So we'll break it out. We'll say, oh, there was an executable inside this content as well. Not just that it was HTTP content, but there's an executable being served. We'll look at the actual session details for that. Look at inside these session details, you'll see that it automatically identified there was an executable being transferred, the size of the executable, the name of the executable, and what was actually displayed to the GUI or to the person, right, in his browser or whatever, or whatever protocol he's using. HTTP, I guess it would be his browser, right? So then destination IP address, source IP address, those types of things. What does this identify? Well, that gave a lot more information there in that our client is not only receiving his command and control via HTTP, but he's also sending out executables to other places. So he's probably being part of the exploitation part where he is the domain or the dropper location or the retrieve location for some Trojan dropper where you're reaching out and they're taking executables from our client server and distributing it to other hacked boxes, right? So we may want to look at those logs and tell those people that we possibly infected them through this whole campaign. All right, so here's the other things you could do. You can go ahead and there's that raw display, right, where it's hex. Remember, we can see it in hex or we can see it when it's broke out. You can go ahead and get the PCAP, download it right here from the interface and, use your favorite tools such as Wireshark or, whatever else you have or some script to analyze it further. So what are the key takeaways from this general correlation here? So it's key to know that correlation can occur on other correlated events. It doesn't have to be just, hey, I saw an IPS event and a firewall event. Did it work? Did it not work? It can get a lot more advanced. You can correlate on top of correlated events, and then on top of those events to narrow that down. What you're trying to do here is automate in the system the false positive rate. So if you have something that's kind of just more of an informational alert, but it can be used in context with a correlation alert to give you, badness, such as, non-HTTP traffic or a non-HTTP server giving HTTP traffic, right? He's acting as the server. That's an informational alert. It may be bad, it may not be, who knows. And then we correlate it again to get a bigger picture, right, or a more definite guide. A correlation dashboard or an incident dashboard provides an analyst with what is important. Out of all those millions of events that are occurring, these are the few that have been correlated by the system, and we think these are important. Again, content awareness helps position SIEM as a forensic tool. SIEM provided these actionable items, right? So we automatically know that the antivirus failed to identify the HTTP command and control spot. We might want to go update its virus definitions, reinstall it, maybe seek another antivirus, who knows. Firewall mitigation, we can block the Finland IP. Scoped the event really quickly, right? So we can then build a total incident response strategy around this so that junior people can then react to these a lot quicker, right? So we know the executable name and size. We know the time frame that it happened. We know the conclusive evidence that our spamming was unsuccessful. And we're also serving up a malicious executable to the Internet. So these are all things that we need to do in our incident response strategy and be aware of so that we can not only provide this to the rest of the environment, but also how are we going to react to somebody claiming that we infected them with some malicious executable. All right, so the other important thing here is that SIEM speed was how quickly you could react to the issue and not just how quickly information was available. I'm running short on time and I want to answer questions, so just know that SIEM correlation for botnet classification can get larger and larger and larger. This is a blow-up of that individual diagram where you can detect even IRC command and control or spam bots and HTTP's zombies, those types of things. All right. I think this is a copy of the slides and it just got thrown back in there. And I think I'm going to move right into questions. All right, yeah, so I think, Dan, you're going to ask some questions.
Yep. Jeremy, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, we got a bunch of questions that have come in. We got about 10 minutes or so to answer them, so I guess the more concise you can be with your answers, that would be appreciated. But anything that we don't get to, we'll have Jeremy follow up with everyone individually. These questions have come in along the presentation, so I hope the context is there when I ask them to you. You may have to think back to some of the earlier slides, but I'll mix and match kind of where I pull them from. First question is, what happens if the zip file has a password? Would it flag it as a possible breach?
Yeah, you can actually look for password zip files. So in most content monitoring solutions, it won't be able to like brute force the password or guess the password or any of that stuff, but it'll be able to report that, hey, this file could not be unzipped because it was password protected. Obviously, we couldn't look for sensitive information in that because we don't know the password. But that's something that you could get an event for.
Mm-hmm. This looks like a similar question. When you're referencing the print monitor tool, is that something that can look at embedded files, talking about like PDF and the like?
Yeah, that's key here. So it doesn't only understand that, hey, there was a printing document going over to the print server and understanding the protocol for that, but some of the more high-speed printers and copiers and stuff, you can actually just copy the document over to a share, and then it reads it off that share and then prints that document, right? You can put it in this giant queue. And, yeah, it can see that it was, an Excel document or a PDF document and actually identify what was, inside that, or if there was malicious content or sensitive information in that. So it's not just the file extensions and stuff to document the classification of the document. It's the actual looking at the document to understand that that was a PDF file, because it's nothing for you to possibly send a document over and just change its extension or append an extension to it, such as .txt, or append it to a PDF. And then most of your applications, they don't really use the extension for opening the application. A lot of times they use what they call the first 8 bytes, which is like, I can't even think off the top of my head, but it's like the smart bytes to identify what that is. And they'll use that to open it. So the extension is meaningless in many cases for some applications. Windows tends to use the extension for classification and association of files, but some applications don't. So, yeah, you could.
Bandwidth constraints is one of our listeners' concerns. How much of that is required for content-aware additions?
Oh, yeah. So, bandwidth is always a problem for anything that's monitoring information like this. most application data monitoring is done in near real time, and what that means is it adds no latency. It's not like an IPS. It's not a DLP where it's going to stop the transaction in place. So bandwidth can actually definitely make stuff harder. And when you push 10 gigs, that requires a very expensive, high-speed solution that's very, very large. But it's like the 1 gig rate. It's fairly nominal. It's okay. I would say that content awareness at 40 gigs is probably not happening today, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't design a solution to do that. It's just going to require a large amount of resources and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. The question here is, are we talking about protocol anomaly detection? That must have been something that you referenced earlier.
So, we are. So application data monitoring is protocol anomaly detection, but it's a little different than your standard protocol anomaly detection. Standard protocol anomaly detection is normally associated with networks and what they call network behavior analysis engines, right? NBARs, those types of things. Where protocol anomaly detection in the context of content awareness is not just networks behaving badly, but applications behaving badly. So did something occur weird in the network transaction? Well, application data monitoring would know that because he has to understand that sublayer. But he would also understand if there's some weird context in a PDF file, such as circular references in a PDF file or embedded executables in a PDF file, those types of things. So protocol anomaly detection isn't just your network layer in the application awareness, but all the way up to the application layer.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy, what would constitute or generate a weak password event?
So in the use case here, I don't know what the rule was exactly, but they're very definable. So you're looking at things that are using the ability you have to be able to see the clear text password, right? So it's, like HTTP authentication, it's going to be FTP authentication, telnet, those types of things. And you can set constraints around, like a regular expression-like thing, looking for a length of the password or the alphabet of the password, right? Was there alphanumeric characters, and was it at least 8 characters long? If it wasn't, then you would flag something for like a weak password. You could also say that everything that's a password that is transferred into clear text would be a weak password. So anything that I see that is in an authentication event and I can actually see that it was a password, that would be a weak password as well.
Mm-hmm. When we're talking about standing up a SIEM solution, how long does something like that take?
A lot of that depends on the environment and the aptitude of the team that's standing it up. And their capabilities, and not only that, but like maintenance windows and what do they want to bring in first, what are their goals and stuff. It's not uncommon for a SIEM solution to be in a normal environment that you already have quite a bit of knowledge of what's going on and stuff. A 1-day, 2-day stand-up kind of thing. And then SIEM is a over-time tuning kind of thing where you just gain more and more information and you build more and more correlation rules and filters and views and reports as you learn more and more about your environment. So I don't think SIEM ever actually finishes. It's a working tool forever, but just getting it standed up, getting data sources in and trying to figure out what's relevant is relatively easy if you're aware of your environment and can be done in a day. If you're not aware of your environment or what's where and you need to get like passwords for certain things and turn on certain configurations, it could take a week. It really depends on the capabilities and the aptitude and the skill sets of the people implementing them.
Mm-hmm. Does the SIEM product capture and store the payload?
Yes. Well, not ours. I can speak for our SIEM product. Our SIEM product does capture and store the payload. So if you get an IPS event or something, you'll get the payload and we'll keep it. Obviously, that's at a rolling window, right? So SIEM, it could be a 10-year investment. You only have so much disk space. At a rolling window, whatever that is, let's say it's 5 terabytes. Once you get the 5 terabytes, it's a first in, first out kind of thing. That stuff that was stored 3 years ago didn't drop off and new stuff would be associated. So, that's part of the scoping and sizing of a SIEM.
Mm-hmm. Privilege escalation, obviously, is a concern within a lot of organizations. Is this able to highlight privilege elevation actions that are taken within a network?
Yeah, there's actually several built-in rules into our solution where we're looking for things such as, exploit attempt and then followed by additional user being associated with a administrator thing. Or here's a really common one that I worked a case with the other day where privilege escalation was done through a service account where a service account all of a sudden started trying to authenticate to other clients and it had a failed authentication event. That failed authentication event should never occur in a service account because that's normally associated with a script or something. And why would it ever fail unless you were developing the script at the time? So yeah, a lot of that can be correlated and automated for you in a SIEM. I mean, it's basically, you have a defined set of users. They have these privilege levels. If they move out of that realm, let's show it to somebody and let's take action against it.
Mm-hmm. We got time for just a couple more questions here. How does one easily identify what is recommended by firewall mitigation if we would not allow a tool to auto-tune our firewalls without a change ticket?
Let me read that again. How does ID the recommended firewall mitigation? All right, so yeah, this is actually really good because a lot of people don't want their SIEM or IPS or something to reach out and touch certain things and configure it automatically, right? They don't want it to respond because they're scared that it could possibly block something that needed to be. Basically what that is you generate reports on your firewalls or the metrics that you want to measure, and then you hand those to analysts and say these are what's going on, verify them, and then change your configurations for your routers or your firewalls or your mitigation strategies. So it could be either automated where it automatically takes those actions, or it just generates events or alarms or reports that you could analyze to scope what you want to change and how you want to change it. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for once you start monitoring these things to see that paths in the network that you didn't think were being taken are being taken by certain clients or hosts because of a route statement in a router that's misconfigured or an access control list that's reversed and it's actually letting stuff in and it's supposed to be not letting stuff in. It's on the wrong interface, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, just basic reporting.
You mentioned the maturation level to the SIEM product becoming application aware. This question asks how much actionable intelligence can be gathered if the SIEM just listen to traffic going out over the wire.
So you can get it's the context scenario, right? We can enrich that log. We can reverse look up the DNS. We can look at a Win server. We can look at geolocation, those types of things. That's the normal stuff. That's what you're going to be limited to in the context. You may be able to even do some stuff where you can claim that you know what that file is based off of its extension, or you can claim that you know what protocol it is based off the ports that were being utilized. But that's where the application awareness changes things, right? Because it's port agnostic. You don't have to know what port it is. You don't have that association. It identifies the protocols on whatever, and it breaks it all out, and it verifies that, hey, that document extension does match what was declared in the HTTP traffic and what the file was exactly. So that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. What kind of storage do you need for the application of the SIEM on a moderate-sized multi-site enterprise?
All right, so just so I can only answer this for us, right? We don't offer like the SIEM as software. We offer SIEM as appliance. So we have everything that scales from, I think our smallest box has like a tera and a half or a tera of storage, all the way up to 50 tera. We offer it in appliances, and that's all a scoping, sizing issue as we walk you through the implementation of a SIEM and the purchase of a SIEM.
Okay. Well, and I just want to end with one final quick question for me, Jeremy. When we're talking about SIEM products, obviously we see all these breaches going on, all these intrusions. These hackers seemingly are getting in without any problem. Is SIEM one of those solutions that really can help is more on the defensive side of things that could really help limit these things? And are we at the point now where we need to inevitably accept that hackers are going to get in and we need to deploy defenses such as this?
Yeah, I think you. Even though it's a question, you pretty much answered the question. Yeah, we are at that point, right? Think of SIEM as you have all these really, really smart individual tools that don't normally talk to each other and integrate the information, and that's normally left up to the person doing it. So that's what hackers and the advanced penetration techniques and stuff, right? That's how pen testers get in and hide, is they know that you're not associating that information. So attackers are going to get in, they're going to follow these channels, and they're going to stay under the radar, where an analyst can only look at point systems one at a time. Well, that SIEM bringing it all together, it is the best tool that I can think of right now to bring all that together and add the intelligence so that you get the whole overview of the environment. And once you implement a SIEM in a successful manner, there's a lot of failed SIEM implementations out there based off of a whole bunch of different reasons. We pride ourselves in not having any of those that I'm completely aware of, but it's simplifying that. It's being able to get the analyst to look at those things and see the entire environment overall. it just brings so much to the analyst and intelligence to an analyst. It's incredible. So I think you kind of answered it. It is the tool that I can think of today with today's technology that brings all that together and gives you the intelligence.
Yep, gives that visibility into what's going on, which is something all administrators want. So, Jeremy, we will end on that note. I certainly appreciate the insight. We had a lot of questions. There were some that, unfortunately, we were not able to get to, so we will have the folks at Nitro follow up with you guys individually to make sure those are answered. And I want to thank everyone for listening. The webcast will be available on demand on the SE Magazine website upon its completion. And, Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, everybody.